Well, good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ask the Zamboni Experts podcast. Today we have our host, myself, Marty Elliott, sales account representative for Zamboni Company, and our guest is Nathan Robinson, our supervisor of recreational facilities out of the town of Collingwood, Ontario. Good morning.
Morning, Marty.
How are things in your world?
Well, different. Let's just leave it at that, I guess. It's something we've never experienced in our lifetimes, and certainly once we're out of it, I don't want to again.
Yeah, there's no question about that. You know, we've done some other podcasts talking about post COVID-19 and what's going to change in the industry, specifically in arenas and how we manage them functionally day to day. And definitely, I'm sure you folks will have change occurring in your facilities. Speaking of the two facilities that are in the town of Collingwood, the Eddie Bush Arena, and I'll have you speak to that in a moment, and also the Centennial Park facility, which is fairly new. Why don't you share a little bit with our guests and our viewers, listeners, about those two facilities, Nathan?
Well, so the two of the facilities that I have the pleasure of supervising, so the Eddie Bush Memorial Arena, probably one of the oldest arenas that still exist in Canada. Pretty much original roof still on the old girl. We've just continued to maintain and update throughout the years. Really proud to still have an arena of that style in service and fully functional. As far as the other rink goes, also kind of one of the newer type of facilities in the industry. It's a sprung structure. It was built by BLT approximately 7 years ago, and we carry ice here normally 12 months of the year.
Wow. Yeah, to our listeners, if you ever get a chance, you're in Collingwood, the Eddie Bush Arena, Nathan had mentioned the structure of it, the internal structure of it. Yeah, there have been some changes construction-wise inside, but the original roof, what a feature, what a beautiful feature that building is. So it's on here, Ontario Street, the main street of Collingwood. If you have an opportunity for our listeners, take a stop in one day and take a view of the facility. So Nathan, our topic today, the importance of edging, and something that you've had your hands on and have done for many years. Why don't you share with our listeners your experience and where you've been and how long you've been in the industry?
Well, Marty, I've, been in the industry directly, indirectly for almost 21 years now. I kind of got into this industry by accident. Went to school for physical health, fitness, and leisure management, which encompasses recreation as well. And I was a fitness consultant for a number of years and realized that really it wasn't for me. I was spending an awful lot of time at the facility I was working at the time, which was the Honda Recreation Center in Alliston, spending so much time at the rink that my manager at the time suggested that maybe, I get some training in regards to refrigeration and ice operations and maintenance. And so we went down the path, and I did, and it's been a heck of a ride, I guess. I was working previously town of Innisfil as an operator first in 2007, and moved on to a supervisor around 2009, and title change to operations supervisor a couple of years later. Since moved on, and here at the town of Collingwood now as the supervisor of recreational facilities for the Parks, Rec, and Culture Department.
You know, that's a great story from a succession planning standpoint. And, our listeners, some people out there wondering what their vision is of their future as far as a career path. Definitely Nathan demonstrates coming into something accidentally, but where you've come and where you are today, Nathan, speaks loudly of the industry. And the industry, and Nathan, you can certainly speak to this, is definitely changing from a aspect of a lot of senior people are starting to retire. I think speaking of Ontario, it's around 20% the next 5 years are going to be leaving the industry. So folks, if you're listening and you're wondering about a career path, reach out to Nathan. He might have an opportunity for you in the near future down the road. So Nathan, topic of the importance of edging. Why is edging so important? Help us understand that, Nathan.
Well, I think it's definitely one of the most important portions of ice maintenance and ice operation in your buildings. These buildings are here for the ice, and I always look at it as that hotel kind of concept. You know, when you rent a hotel room or a facility, you expect that the room is clean, it's been maintained, the bed's been changed, so on and so forth. I kind of have the same expectation for my users that come into my facilities. You know, it should be clean entering the facility, you know, change rooms, lobby, smell clean, look clean, and be sanitized, especially in, you know, with what we have going on right now with COVID-19. But they should get that same experience. They shouldn't walk into new, fresh. So rooms should be clean, organized, ready, and the ice surface should be in the same state. So maintained to a high standard, flooded before they enter the surface. And if it's flooded, it's one thing, but it's got to be a safe surface. So that's where the edging practices come into play.
So let me ask you, how often should a facility actually be performing their edging process?
Well, Marty, that's going to completely be based on what you're having take place on your ice surface. It's really as often as it's needed, and it's not something that should be forgotten about. It's based on the conditions of your ice and what your operators are seeing out there, right? And you're going to know based on, a lot of guys will say, well, it doesn't look like it needs to be edged. Has anybody measured? And that's really what it boils down to, measuring your ice and, you know, setting those benchmarks ahead of time, knowing what you expect as far as, you know, thickness of your ice. And for me, at a minimum in a municipal setting, I'd like to see 1.5 inches of ice everywhere.
Yeah, and we know that due to the fact of maybe some operators aren't using the proper procedure with their flood water and turning it down into corners, that's where the edging really is imperative that takes place, which I believe should be on a daily basis due to the fact of different operators sitting in the seat operating their Zamboni. Do you have your operators do their edging in the morning or at the end of the shift, at the end of the night? What's your preference?
To be honest, Marty, it's going to vary based on some facilities schedule ice maintenance and edging for certain times of the day. Here, we kind of don't have necessarily a set ice maintenance block based on our busy programming, but we find time based on the ice conditions. I would suggest that edging should take place when the building is not full of people, number one. You want to give ample time, especially if you're using an edger that's a combustion engine, to ensure that your air quality in the facility is on par for, you know, your patrons coming in the building. And I think that's one thing that's forgotten about an awful lot is these edgers, especially combustion engines, they do emit some toxic chemicals, and we don't necessarily want in our bodies. And looking at it from, you know, a staffing point of view, my operators are the guys and gals who are exposed to the facility itself more than anybody. And since exercise is taking place on the ice surface, you know, your lungs are working hard, and you certainly don't want those coming into your building to be ingesting, you know, carbon monoxide or NO2, right? It's just not something you want people taking in and creating that facility sickness that is out there and was out there an awful lot in the past.
You know, you make a good point on the actual air quality, which proper SOP, an operator should be checking their HVAC, their ventilation system. Do your operators, are they wearing masks when they're using their edger?
No, the PPE I'm expecting my guys to be wearing. So you're wearing your helmet, depending on where you are in the world, CSA approved work boots, long pants, long sleeves, safety glasses, and we even have our staff wearing anti-vibration gloves as well. Another tool we do use, because I touched on the air quality, is an air quality monitor. So we're checking air quality throughout the facility, lobby, change rooms, stands at center ice prior to edging, and then again 15 minutes after edging has taken place as well, to ensure that in fact it is safe for those entering your building, and ensuring that while the process is happening, that your ventilation system is in fact on as well.
Right, right. So let's talk about edging specifically, and the performance of edging, and why we do it, and what is created based on the ice conditions to proceed with edging. As many people know, some don't, the uniqueness of the Zamboni ice resurfacer is our blade bar, our blade, and the bar itself being tapered the first 6 inches of both ends, right and left, and tapered up 3 degrees. Talk about a little bit about what that does and how that affects for you folks to be edging on probably a daily basis if need be, and what takes place there.
Well, Marty, I think you touched on it just earlier here. You mentioned operators driving too slow, not controlling their water during their first couple laps of the resurfacing process. And essentially, we all drive a little slower around the boards, and rightfully so. You know, you've got a large machine out there, you're close quarters with the kick plate of the boards, and you're trying to get as tight as possible to the boards. But you did mention about the unique tapered blade, and that unique tapered blade unfortunately does not allow you to get tight to the boards no matter how close you get that machine to the boards. So essentially you end up creating that glorified bowl effect, if I can use that term.
Right, yeah, definitely. So what's your standard operating procedure from a training aspect when it pertains to edging? Walk us through, what's that look like as far as if you have a part-time or a seasonal operator coming on board? What is the process that you walk them through in a training aspect of edging?
Well, I guess there's a number of ways to go about that, Marty. For me, I like to do the paper aspect of things first. So, you know, the written procedure, explaining what the worker shall do, training requirements, personal protective equipment, all laid out as well in the SOP. So kind of going through the SOP itself in the paper form with that individual, and then continuing to the actual edger and the surface itself, and what things need to take place. You know, prior to edging, please turn on arena ventilation systems, ensure you have all your PPE there that you're going to need to perform the task. And then for me, a lot of people learn by, you know, seeing is believing, you know, so demonstrating for that individual, you know, the process, how the edger works, what the different controls do on the edger, showing the individual, and then essentially having them perform the tasks or operate the equipment while you're there to observe, and then being able to give them tips or, you know, what they should do to improve. But there's little things, you know, after you've done it for a number of years, everybody has their system and kind of their way of doing it, right?
Right, right. You know, one of the things I've noticed in my path into arenas and being on site when edging takes place, the one thing I've recognized that doesn't happen enough is the operator actually inspecting the ice itself before they actually put the edger in their hand, and also inspecting the actual dashboards and puck plate. Why don't you speak a little bit about that and what that looks like?
Well, again, it's at the beginning of the edging process. It doesn't hurt to physically get out on the ice, close all the doors, close your ice gate as well, and do a walk around. You know, you're checking for screws that are sticking out, the kick plate if it's been damaged at all, ensuring your, you know, your benches and all your doorways open as they should, the gaps in your boards, and then it's just a good time. You can get out there and inspect everything to do with your ice surface, the ice itself, and like I mentioned, the boards, the glass, the doors, everything is part and parcel of, you know, the process. It's ensuring you're safe, and you know, those who are coming in are going to be safe in the end as well. Protecting your asset and protecting your patrons and individuals using your facility.
That's great information. Great information. Now, I know one of the facilities that you supervise, the Centennial Park facility, the sprung roof system. We have one of our other hosts, Scott Douglas, our sales associate out of Brantford, Ontario. I think Scott has a couple questions he wants to ask you regarding that facility. Take it away, Scott.
Mr. Robinson, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Yourself, Scott?
Oh, no complaints here at my end. Nathan, I just want to ask you kind of any differences or challenges between maintaining the sand floor at Central Park versus Eddie Bush in terms of edging or even ice maintenance. I know you mentioned you want like to keep 1.5 inches at all times. I'm just wondering if there's any direct differences that you've noticed between having a direct comparison in your backyard.
I guess the big thing with the sand floor is you can't just simply drill down or do a tap test like you do on a traditional concrete floor. We carry ice 12 months of the year here. So I think that's the route, or why they went the route they did with the sand floor here at Central Park Arena. There are many challenges with having a sand floor. Like I mentioned, you can't do tap tests or drill tests to see how thick your ice is, in fact. So there are a number of options out there. Level ice is out there, and many machines and those who operate facilities with sand floors have a level ice system. So you're relying on that particular piece of equipment to tell you that your ice is in fact safe. To me, the really only true test is to do the tap test, and essentially you're going to have to create plates or means that you can drill down and do the actual measurement of the ice. And every operator has that fear of hitting the brine line, dropping some, you know, 6 by 6 inch by 6 inch plates under the ice and having them specifically marked out on the surface to tell the operator that's a safe spot to do a tap test. In my head, is probably the best route to go. It could potentially be an unsightly thing to some individuals who, you know, especially a rink where, you know, they have a lot of TV airtime and you see little dots on the ice, but realistically, we're protecting the patrons that way, and we're covering our own butts as well to avoid litigation in the future.
Oh, that's fantastic. Another question I kind of had, and the last time I was at your facility, I think you'd mentioned that the sand floor and the ice on top of it was original when they built it 7 years ago. Just wondering, amongst the pandemic, I'm sure some people have taken their ice out, and maybe in the southern states. Any plans on using this kind of perceived downtime to jump on that and retake it, or is just the challenge too much at this time?
So we have pulled all of our ice surfaces here in the town of Collingwood. Just from an energy savings standpoint, we all know that our economy and our industry is essentially bleeding money right now. We have, most places have zero revenue coming in other than what the municipalities collected from taxpayers at this time. So we've taken all of our ice surfaces out, and the sand floor here has been, the rink here, which is the sand floor, has been in for 7 years since it was installed. So it was something that was planned for this fall, but considering the times we're in right now, we have pulled that project forward and removed the ice surface here at Central Park Arena. The sand has been re-raked out so it's level. We checked it with laser levels, and we're kind of awaiting right now to see, what our government's going to do and what announcements the federal government has in the next few days to upcoming weeks. A lot of uncertainty.
No, definitely. I always have heard that putting in a sand floor is one of the most challenging parts of an arena business. I'm curious as to if you would attest to that, or if you found it wasn't too bad just re-raking it out.
Well, for me, I'll be honest, I haven't had a ton of experience with sand floors. A lot of the rinks that I've been at and have had the pleasure in being involved with have all been concrete floors. But essentially with a sand floor, you're going to create a concrete surface after you've made a soup, and I'll throw that in quotes, or a slurry out there. So you're essentially going to completely saturate that sand surface prior to initializing any of your refrigeration equipment. Once it's good and soupy and you do turn on your refrigeration system, you're going to create a giant slab out there, much like concrete. And then the process basically takes off from there. You know, you're going to build some clear ice to provide that buffer between, you know, the top surface and the sand. Drop your nuts on the appropriate dots where you know you're going to have circles and face-off dots, center of your crease area at the goal line, painting your surface white, and continuing the process from there. It's the same process, just slightly different startup.
That's some great information, Nathan. It's Marty back. Great information to share with our listeners, which leads me into my next question. What other ice maintenance tips can you provide our listeners as far as prior to edging that the operators need to be aware of prior to putting their edging machine in their hands?
Well, I guess with any piece of equipment, Marty, the circle check portion needs to be completed ahead of time. You don't want to walk out in the surface or go perform any activity without your equipment being in optimal shape, ensuring, you know, your blades on your edger are in fact not chipped, broken, or missing, ensuring they're tight, ensuring your machine is got fuel or is completely charged. You're just wanting to have all of your equipment ready, your PPE ready to complete the task that, you know, you're looking to do. We're all paid well in this industry, in my opinion, for what we do, and it's just doing your part to ensure, you know, you're not wasting valuable time, because we all know how busy our rinks and business can be when, you know, we're in go time in a tournament, right? Using your time effectively and efficiently.
Right. Yeah, critical. There's only so many hours in the day, and there's operational costs, and one of them is payroll. So let me ask you something, and I've seen it, and I'm sure you have in your path as well. How do you get your operators to buy into edging? It's something that I see as a big challenge out there. It's something that they just don't have high on the priority list. What is it that you do differently to make sure that that task is done, whether it's a daily or every second day process in your standard operating procedure?
Well, I mentioned earlier in regards to that hotel room analogy and what we expect as a customer, you know, renting a hotel space and what they're essentially providing to the public or your patrons that are coming into your facility. You want to provide the best service and product you can. And really, if you're not edging, doing ice maintenance, ensuring your facility's clean, you're not doing your job. People pay an awful lot of money. We all know that ice rates aren't cheap out there. On the low end, you know, you're around that $200 mark to upwards of, you know, 400 and change an hour. They should be getting the best product that we can provide them for the money they're paying.
Yeah, no question.
A lot of my staff, sorry, Marty, a lot of my staff, I've also put them through forms of legal awareness training through different accredited associations, one being the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association. They offer lots of adult learning environment training out there And legal 1 and legal 2, I think, is a minimum standard that staff should be taking to understand what could happen, what can happen, and what we hope wouldn't happen, right?
Yeah, definitely. And great topic to talk about in a future podcast as far as legal awareness and liabilities and things like that. Because if that standard operating procedure of edging doesn't take place, there can be a liability, a legal issue that can arise, and we certainly don't want that to take place. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was last year, at the tail end of last year, you took delivery of 2 new EZ3 battery edgers. Was that last fall or was that this year? I can't remember. Time's flying by. I think it was last year.
Yeah, I think it was either late last fall or early January, Marty, when we actually received the 2 EZ3s.
Right. So you've had both combustion engine edgers in your hand, and now you're using the EZ3 electric Zamboni edger. Can you talk about the difference between the two?
Well, the big thing for me, again, it's the air quality. We're all looking to achieve that green stamp of approval, and the battery powered edgers that are on the market today are far superior to what, first entered the market years ago. Realistically, there's a lot of cost savings there too. You're no longer doing maintenance on a combustion engine, so spark plugs, oil changes, carb cleans, rebuilds, whatever the case is, that's taken completely out of the equation. You're operating a piece of equipment, sealed batteries. It's just, in my opinion, I don't see why, in this day and age, why we aren't all using battery powered edgers, because we all know that they're pretty much the worst pollutant in our industry as far as arenas go.
That's a great point. Our governing body here in Ontario, TTSA, is certainly looking at that in the industry as far as removing the combustion engine edgers moving forward whenever that happens. But speak to the actual charging system. You kind of touch base on that as far as maintaining. When I speak of the EZ3 battery edger, talk a little bit about the charging practices that you've instituted with your operators on a daily process.
Well, the charger itself, Marty, is very simple to use, at least from my experience with it. You complete your edging process, you've brought the machine itself back into your storage area, whether that's the ice resurfacer room or a storage area just off the ice resurfacer room. I ask that my staff clean the machine out, not leave it full of snow, or if you're at ice out season, paint of any kind. Shutting the key off on the unit once you have it to where you're off the surface, and ensuring that that disconnect is in the off position as well, so the vertical position. Then plugging the battery charger into the EZ3, and then finally the charger itself into the wall. And from what I understand, Marty, it's good to keep it plugged in. It just continues to keep that top up on the battery, and that way it's ready to go when you actually require it again.
Yeah, you're right. It does have a feature in it for trickle charging. So my theory is, if you're not using it, keep it plugged in. It's not going to harm the batteries or the system itself. Speak to, I guess the other part is what's unique about the EZ3 edger is our carbide tip blades, 8-sided carbide tip blades. Have you found a difference from what you previously used for edging to this style of edger? And talk about the pros and cons about that, Nathan.
Well, I've used multiple edgers that have been on the market, whether they be, as I mentioned earlier, combustion engine edger or battery powered edgers. What the Zamboni features with those carbide square blades, they allow you the opportunity to flip it around. You have multiple sides to work with, so it's not as simple as, well, it's dull now, I'll throw those set of blades out and replace it with new ones. Well, you've got options to flip that around, turn it, and you've always got the ability to have that sharp cutting blade that you want.
Right. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, Marty. And simple to do too. You know, simple hex, Allen key in there, and a wrench. You know, it's not something you got to get up on a workbench to work on. You can, in my experience, you can simply tip it back on its handle and perform work. Obviously, ensuring that the disconnect is off and it's safe to work on. And I prefer that you have two individuals anytime you're doing maintenance, whether it's on the blades of an edger or an ice resurfacer. Always two people there.
Right. So when your operators are complete the task of edging, Nathan, what is the next step? Why don't you share with our listeners the next step that they should be performing after they complete the edging?
Well, like an ice resurfacer, the edger doesn't get perfectly tight to the boards either. So there is a lip or an edge that's left. That's got to be removed. Otherwise, you're just creating a ladder system for ice to build on again. So my staff are required to, after the edger's been placed back in storage again, you're out on the surface and you're removing that edge that's left behind from your edging process. And of course, afterwards, you can't simply just leave the surface as is. You've got to cut down or remove what I mentioned earlier is that glorified bowl. The edger creates that trough for the Zamboni or your ice resurfacer to allow that runner to drop into and begin cutting and removing that buildup. And simply you're doing overlapping passes, working your way out towards the center of the ice, and to that where you've deemed as your optimal or level ice. It's removing everything in between from the boards all the way out to where your ice is in fact level.
Right. I'm sure from our listeners, they're probably trying to visualize what we're talking about. I know you and I know what that is, and I know that we're going to be coming out with a Zamboni training video on edging. So we'll definitely be able to demonstrate that for our listeners to actually visually see that. Yeah, definitely. So Nathan, anything else that you can add to this discussion as far as the importance of edging that we maybe overlooked?
It's not something we can forget about, Marty. It has to be, now whether it's a daily thing, morning, evening, whenever it is safest to in fact perform the edging routine, it has to happen. As I mentioned earlier, we live in a world now where litigation it's out there, and you don't want to be trying to explain in court that no, my ice was safe. Well, how do we know that? Well, it's simply documentation. Everything we do in our industry has to be documented. Whether you have an edging log, your ice maintenance log, caretaker's log books, the list goes on and on as far as different logs that staff and myself are completing on a daily basis. But it's there to protect the worker, the supervisor, and ultimately, the owner, whether it be a municipality or private ownership. It's to ensure that what we in fact have done was completed, has been signed off on, and the product we're putting out there to our users is safe to use.
Nathan, I want to take this opportunity to thank you so kindly for taking the time out of your schedule. I know things, even though COVID-19 exists, but you're still busy with maintaining your facilities and parks within your town. But I do want to thank you very kindly for taking the time and sharing your experiences. Wish you all the best. Stay safe. That goes for you and all the staff at the town of Collingwood. Thanks again.
Thank you, Marty. Appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to speak as well. I certainly don't profess to be an expert by any means, but if there's any takeaways for anyone and little tips or secrets of the trade, I'm always willing to lend a hand.
Yeah, it's great. Again, a veteran that gives back to the industry, and it's so enjoyable to be able to work with you and your staff. So thanks again, Nathan. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Hope so, Marty. Take care of yourself.
You too, pal.